shine in the light. Jannah in Africa. Welcome to Jannah.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Voices of Africa. Thank you for putting aside everything you had to do to watch this scorching broadcast. For many years, the people of Anglophone Cameroon complained that they were being marginalized by both the regime of the country's first president, Amadou Ahidjo, and 40 years of Paul Biya. In 2016-2017, what started as peaceful protests by lawyers and teachers very quickly spiraled into an armed conflict. Now the demand is for outright separation. Surprisingly, those that the armed groups claim to be protecting do not all support the war. If they are being liberated, why then the reluctance? If the war leaders are truly liberators, why the balkanized front against a more united army? That's the country's military. Ladies and gentlemen, to take these questions and more, I invited a gentleman. I can't imagine who doesn't know him. But for the purposes of programming, I'll disclose his identity before you know who the person is. That's Mr. Chris Anu. When I asked him how he would like to be identified on the broadcast, he said, "Divine, I am the president of the Ambazonia interim government." Ladies and gentlemen, join me now in welcoming Mr. Chris Anu on the platform.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for inviting me. I look forward to the conversation tonight.
I have to be the one to thank you, Mr. Chris Anu, for accepting to come and take questions from a platform that's not called an Ambazonia platform. I appreciate you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. I look forward to that.
Mr. Chris Anu, people in other countries are watching this broadcast. Many more millions will watch later on. When they hear the name Cameroon, they can not only locate where it is geographically on the map, they can say who the president is. That is Mr. Paul Biya. When I ask you how you would like to be identified on this show, you said, as I have said earlier, that you are the president of the interim government of Ambazonia. Mr. Anu, what you call Ambazonia are the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon. That's going to be confusing to those who are not from Cameroon.
Well, you are quite correct. Yes, Ambazonia is an appellation that we thought we give ourselves, considering that we cannot be fighting to be an independent country and still referring to ourselves as the Cameroons. And so we thought Ambazonia should be the appropriate name, going by our history from the discovery of Ambas Bay. So, but I think over the 7 years of the struggle since we declared an independent Southern Cameroon in 2017, the name Ambazonia has pretty much become a mainstream name. So that, to the extent that it is difficult to find any African who doesn't understand who or what Ambazonia is.
A lot of people are asking Mr. Chris Anu, who designated you to speak for the people of the former British Southern Cameroons, now the southwest and northwest regions, and what you call Ambazonia.
Well, I think the premise of that question is not founded, considering that if they recognize that we created an interim government to prosecute this struggle from 2017, they would understand First, I was the communications secretary until a few months ago, and before becoming the leader of the movement recently. So if you're talking about the interim government of Ambazonia, yes, I qualify to speak on behalf of Ambazonia from the platform of the interim government since the inception of the government, and also since becoming the leader of the interim government. And let me also add that I think it is not an overstatement to suggest that the interim government is the main group that is out there, has been out there for the past 7 years prosecuting this struggle. I think it is also not an overstatement to suggest that had this interim government not been there, I think this struggle may have tanked. As of this moment, La République has remained unable to dissolve the 2 cubes of sugar because this interim government has made it difficult for them to do so by our ability to raise funds to prosecute the war, and by our ability to also recruit fighters on the ground, and also by our ability to make sure that the necessary equipment is in the hands of those fighters on the ground.
Mr. Chris Anu, you are the president of the Ambazonia interim government. A government comes to occupy a geography to exercise power through elections, sometimes in Africa through a military coup d'etat, and in some countries like Morocco, hereditary. In other words, father hands down power to son. Would you please clarify, those who are not from that geographical space I will refer to here as Cameroon, how the interim government even came into existence? They were not voted. They didn't come to power through a military coup. So how do you become a government?
In our context, it is very simple. Voted or not voted, we are not dealing with a normal situation here. We are dealing with a situation where war was declared on our people by corrupt colonizers, in La République du Cameroon. We saw the need to organize ourselves, form a structure that we would call a government, those diaspora-based. The people on the ground embraced it and accepted it and endorsed it and legitimized it, which is why we are here today. And Ground Zero, what we call Ambazonia, continues to support it and to want to do what we expect them or want them to do. We do it out of love. We are not doing it out of cohesion or with a kind of force that La République du Cameroun in Yaoundé would want to use. If you have been following up the struggle for the past 7 years, you see the kind of aggression and the escort policy that French Cameroon tried to impose on Ambazonia, just to try to force the population, to subdue the population, to claim that they own Ambazonia. We live in the diaspora. We run this government from the diaspora. Yet, can you imagine? Ground Zero, the public, Ground Zero, the people of Ambazonia are inclined to listen and to do what we say, then inclined to doing what La République du Cameroun on the ground in Yaoundé would say. That tells you our legitimacy comes from the people, not from some colonial foreign structure in La République du Cameroun.
You are watching Voices of Africa on Chat Night. My name is Divine Chamukong. My guest is Mr. Chris Anu, who is the president of the Ambazonia interim government.
We love Chat Night Africa. Keep watching Chat Night Africa.
Mr. Chris Anu, what areas do fighters loyal to your leadership control?
Fighters loyal to us control Ambazonia, the entire Amazonian territory.
Here's the reason why.
And that is why you find it difficult to have French Cameroon administrators govern any part of our territory as before.
Here is why I ask you the question. I have a text here. Somebody sent me naming about 5 presidents of different interim governments in Ambazonia. Is that assessment correct, sir?
No, it's not correct. The people who name 10 or 5 or 3 interim governments in Ambazonia, they are the kind of people who foment divisions in the diaspora. The interim government wasn't formed out of a vacuum. I'd like everybody to understand this. When we say we have one and only interim government in Ambazonia, this is what we mean. When the interim government was created by Sisiko Ayok Tabe, we agreed there and then that for checks and balances, for effective administration and efficiency and transparency,
I like everybody to understand.
there's an echo in your background.
Yes, that's okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so when the interim government was created back in 2017, we agreed that for the purposes of transparency and accountability, there should be other structures that check the powers of the interim government. And for that reason, the Restoration Council was created. We also had a judiciary. That was also the Judicial Council created besides the executive being the interim government comprising of the leader and the cabinet. So we still have those structures in this interim government. When anybody now says there are 5 or 10 interim government, I mean, anybody can come up and name a thing, interim government. But when you're talking about legitimacy, you ask yourself, what are the checks and balances in these other so-called interim governments? Do they have a restoration council that checks what they do? Do they have a judicial council that checks what they do? Let me explain to you also what that equally means. Here at the interim government, there are certain things I just cannot do, even if my cabinet agrees to it. We will have to take it to the Restoration Council to approve of it. Now, when you find other groups labeling themselves interim government, the question is, where are these other institutions or structures to qualify?
Let me take a classic example, Mr. Cristiano. Let me take a classic. Have you heard of the name Ayabacho and the ADF?
Yeah, Ayabacho is an individual.
He owns a group called the ADF, and he seems to be the president of another government.
Correct. But no, Ayabacho organization is called Ambazonia Governing Council. He doesn't say he is a government, but if he operates as a government, nothing wrong with that. We are talking about others trying to label themselves interim government. Ayabacho doesn't say he is interim government.
Is the ADF subservient or answerable to your leadership?
The ADF or AGOFC is an independent organization with a leader being Ayabacho.
If you control the territory of what everybody across the world would call North and Southwest regions, then you have to call Ayabacho with an armed group a rebel and his group, and you have to call them rebels.
No, that is not correct, because the fact that we control the territory doesn't mean that there are no other groups who also have fighters on the ground in some parts of the country. Take for example, Ayabacho will know the ADF is somewhere in Momo County. We also know the APLM of Comrade Kwanga also is somewhere in Meme County. We cannot discount that. They are doing the work that we are doing. But when I say that we have forces in all of Amazonia, what I basically mean is that this interim government is the only organization with fighters across the national territory.
The war in Anglophone Cameroon since 2016, 2017 has left a trail of destruction of lives and property. What have been your gains? You are supposed to be the government. You are supposed to have or be leading the government that controls the two territories. What have been the gains of war for you?
Well, the gains of war are many. Number one, we have territories that are under the exclusive control of Amazonia, though you may still find some colonial administrators in those counties. However, you will agree that economic activities and political activities have been basically paralyzed in most of these counties. Number two, we have left Cameroon ungovernable. But I think the biggest one, Divine, is that the 2 cubes of sugar 7 years into the war remain undissolved. We were told that we should give them 2 weeks. 2 weeks, and the 2 cubes of sugar, referring to the northern and the southern zone, would be dissolved. 7 years, a trained army with the world's money, with the world's machinery, they have failed to dissolve the 2 cubes of sugar. If that is not an achievement, ask La République du Cameroon what it is.
In wartime, there are abuses. We've read international organizations publishing human rights abuses, some amounting to war crimes in the areas you say are under your control. Do you take responsibility for the areas, the things going on in your area, sir?
We take responsibility for actions that we endorse or sanction. However, abductions are not some of those. Ransom taking aren't some of those. Attacks on civilians aren't some of those. The kind of actions we take responsibility for are economic sabotage and any action that eliminates any French Cameroon military officer in our territory.
Somebody is going to say that you are picking and choosing by taking responsibility for certain things, but not also responsibility for the abuses that are said to be committed by Amazonia fighters.
But we can only take responsibility for actions that we sanction as a government. I give you a practical example. 3 weeks ago or so, we saw in Big Babanki, a group of women were picked up and tortured by fighters that we control. We did not hesitate to come out and condemn it. We have also equally condemned every act of abduction and ransom taking. You mentioned Cho Ayaba here a minute ago. We have come out and condemned every action of their own. For example, the idea of taxing our civilian population. We condemn that. So yes, this is war. Certain things will happen beyond our control. That doesn't mean we ought to take responsibility for it. Those people are defending their land, defending their territory, and defending their people. And yes, the excesses will be there. Again, it's a war situation.
If Mr. Biya in Yaoundé says he is in control of the entire territory, one would hold him responsible for the massacres that went on at Ngabu and other places, other things, villages burnt down by government soldiers. He should be held responsible because he's the commander-in-chief. Same goes to you.
No, I think, I'm sorry, let me stop you there. I think that is a misplaced question because you cannot say he controls the territory because of what happened in Ngaribu. He should take responsibility. What happened in Ngaribu was an attack on civilians. If that attack was on Amba fighters, we would say maybe if he is taking responsibility and assuming he controls Amazonia, that may make sense. But those were civilians. You should never, ever go after armless civilians or unarmed civilians and call it controlling territory.
You said that your actions, your government are widely embraced on the ground in ground zero. Here is what somebody just sent me as his own assessment of the war going on. Children are not going to school. you, plural, you, Mr. Chris Anu, and your governing council, your interim government, imposed lockdowns on Anglophones. There are kidnappings going on. Your fighters have destroyed the tar roads. I'm reading what has been sent me. Schools and hospitals burned down. How can you, looking at all this, and I haven't read everything they sent to me, it's a long laundry list of things going on, allegedly committed by those you control. How can you give such a rosy picture when these things are going on, sir?
Well, I guess the person who sent you the question must be an Anglophone. We do not know of that terminology in our territory. We are Ambazonians, or call us former British Southern Cameroons. We are not Anglophones. Secondly, you talked about roads, our fighters breaking down roads. Where did those roads exist? Divine, you come from the northern zone. You work there at Radio Bamenda. You lived there for quite a long time, for as much as I did. Before this war began, there was no road from La République du Cameroon to Bamenda. Have we forgotten about that? Was that road broken down by Ambazonia restoration fighters? Of course not. A few months ago, they went into the city of Bamenda and said they are widening the street. Then only to drop it, I think 3 months or 4 months after. They abandoned it after broken people's homes along the street. And then they abandoned it and left. Was that done by Amber? Of course not. Schools are going on. We have ordered community schools in all of Ambazonia to go on. But recently, we have also come up with a policy, and the policy is this: any community school, no schools that have not been opened will be reopened come September. They will not be reopened because we realize La République is taking our actions in school resumptions for a week.
Just hold your thought there. We have somebody on the line from Ground Zero. Hello, this is Voices of Africa on chat night. Hello. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, sir. We are listening to you.
Yes, please. This is Professor Victor Julius Ngo.
Okay.
And I have a question for Mr. Anu.
Yes, he's listening.
Yes, please. Can you honestly tell us if the present-day Northwest and Southwest regions, which in the 1950s was the British Southern Cameroons, can actually get back to that status and administration?
Just ask all your questions, and then when you hang up the phone, he will respond. I assume Mr. Chris Anu is listening to Professor Ngo. Are you, Chris?
I can hear it 5 on 5.
Very good.
Okay, and then British Southern Cameroons achieved independence on the 1st of October by joining the Republic of Cameroon. It therefore means that if Southern Cameroon did not accept the plebiscite, Southern Cameroon would not have achieved independence the way it did and when it did. I say this and I ask this because most Cameroonians, especially Anglophones, have been misled that Southern Cameroon had independence before 1st October 1961. And my second and last question, sir. You and your colleagues are in the diaspora, ensuring that your children have first-class education. Graduation pictures are taken and put on Facebook. And yet, you prevent our children in the Northwest and Southwest regions to go to school. You kill them. You kidnap them. You kill teachers. How do you expect them, those who survive under very difficult conditions, to be educated and literate 20 years from now? Which means, in effect, your children will come back home and lord over our children. Is that fair? Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. And that's Professor Julius Ngor calling from Boya in Cameroon. Right. Chris, what are your answers?
All right. First of all, let me, it's great to hear the voice of Professor Victor Julius Ngor there. I think I spoke with him, I think about a few months ago. I was trying to have him for a guest on my show on ABS, but he wasn't disposed. But I am glad to hear his voice and get his questions and respond to it. First of all, Professor Victor Julius Ngor would observe that we don't give ourselves the appellation Northwest and Southwest. Those are colonial appellations. The same thing with so-called Anglophones. We are not Anglophones. We are not North Soul or Northwest and Southwest. Prof, we are Ambazonians. We will remain Ambazonians. That is number one. Number two, you asked whether it is feasible to get back to the 1950s, where we govern ourselves after leaving Nigeria. And you also insinuate that there was no independence in October 1961. I would disagree with you, Prof. And yes, it is very much possible to get back to the status of the 1950s, where we govern ourselves until 1961. And that is why we are fighting, Prof. That is why we are fighting. We had independence. Nobody should say we did not have independence. The problem that happened was the execution of that independence. Article 1608 was never followed to its logical end. Prof, you are a historian, and you know this. And you know this. When we walk out, when our teachers, our lawyers, and the civil societies protested at the Republic of Cameroon in 2016, they were basically asking for the return to that 1961 status, which I believe Prof supported, and the status entailed the going back to the independence of the Southern Cameroons in a two federal structure as you have in Canada. When Paul Biya responded by declaring war, our people said, well, you have refused to reform your government. You have refused to go back to the original system under which we came together. Now we need to go back to where we were before 1961, which is why we are in this today. We will get there. There is no option to it. Prof, you should understand this. There is no option to going back to the 1950s. That is what we are fighting for.
And take the other question, since we have so many wanting signaling me with. Let
me answer the last question. He mentioned about our children going to school in the diaspora and stopping children on ground zero from going to school. That is not true. That is not true. Prof is he is a university professor. I think he teaches in Boya or one of those universities. Where is he working? Is he just teaching in that school? Schools are going on as we speak. All right.
Now, it's heartwarming that you people are saying that schools will resume in October.
Schools have resumed in some parts of Amazonia where we allow them to resume, and the kind of schools.
You are watching Voices of Africa. Mr. Chris Anu just fell off the line. He will be coming back momentarily. Time for us to listen to get a little musical interlude while waiting for Mr. Chris Anu. As you can see, this is a broadcast that's generating a lot of passion a lot of heat, a lot of participation. People are signaling me that they want to call all from around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, this is something I would like you to enjoy while we wait for Mr. Chris Ano. Of the Ambazonia interim government. And you are watching Voices of Africa on Chat Night. My name is Divine Chamakong. Hello, Dr. Eugene Ate.
Hello, Nee Divine. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. What is your question? Please keep your question or questions short.
Thank you. One thing in politics or in any revolutionary movement is when people lie. And it is really bad to tell somebody on the air that he is a liar. Professor Ngo asked a simple question about schools. And somebody sitting right there is telling me he is in full control of Northwest and Southwest and he doesn't know. Let me read to him this statistic. During the 2021-2022 academic year, 66% of schools in both regions were still closed. And for the 2022-2023 school year, 58% of schools still remain closed, causing the displacement of about 200,000 school-aged children, most of whom remain out of school. This is a statistic that I want Chris Anu with a straight face to tell me that all schools have reopened in the Northwest and Southwest province. Thank you.
Okay. Is that all about your question?
That's all.
Thank you, sir. Yes, Mr. Chris Anu, how do you respond to Dr. Shea Eugene Ate?
Yeah, thank you. I think he makes a good point, but he is mistaken in one thing. We asked for community schools to reopen. We didn't say every school in Ambazonia should open its doors. That is what we said. So when he puts the percentage of how many schools remain unopened, it is understandable. And we still stand on that position that we want to see only community schools going on.
Just to make sure everybody understands you without any ambiguity, what schools are excluded from opening?
Anything that the Republic do Cameroon administered schools, colleges, the so-called government bilingual, government high school, and so on, we do not want to see them open their doors. And any parent sending a child to any of those institutions where the French teachers are still there, they do so at their own risk. Those schools will remain shut down. it remains our policy till this war is over.
Two questions come up right there when you talk about community schools. First of all, there's a problem of accreditation. Number two, even if they are community schools, they're going to be taking exams that are supervised by the government of the Republic of Cameroon. How do you reconcile those positions? They sound disingenuous.
You got to understand that we don't have full control over the territory. Certain things will only happen at certain moments in time. If La Republic, I mean, for as far as the GCE board remains Anglo-Saxon and they set the exams, we allow the schools, the community schools that are going on to take those exams for as long as it has not been set in Yaoundé, it's been set in Boya. It is Anglo-Saxon. That is what we want. And I think it is okay.
The last time they were taking the GCE examination, so I learned that in Bamenda, somebody was imposing ghost towns. That's antithetical to say schools are operating, then when they're writing exams, there is ghost town.
Well, we've always had ghost towns. Are you aware of that? Ghost town isn't a thing of today. We started ghost town since the beginning of this struggle. Maybe you are referring to a special lockdown. When circumstances necessitate it, we will call for lockdowns. We will call for them. This is a war. It is not a normal situation. So when circumstances do necessitate, we will call for those lockdowns. But ghost towns have been a matter, have become part of this struggle from day number one.
I heard you as the president of the Ambazonia interim government say that people embrace all the actions that you take. I have to say ghost towns impose more pain on the people you want to liberate than...
No, you're not correct. You are not correct, because if you talk to people on the ground, in fact, you get on ground zero today and ask people to go to work on Monday, they may stone you. They've gotten used to it. They love it. They want it. But they do not want abductions. They do not want ransom takings. They do not want torture. That's what they don't want.
I heard you accusing the ADF of all the things you are denouncing here, ransom taking, abductions. You are the president of the area he's supposed to be operating in. What actions are you going to take?
Well, we can only advise. Listen, for as long as we have 2 or 3 or 5 groups which are fighting for the independence of Ambazonia, we're not going to chase anybody out. Rather, what we can do is call them for their wrongdoings and tell them we do not endorse it, we will never endorse it, we will never support it. But if they are there for the independence of Ambazonia, we allow them to be there. If you read this Bible, the Bible, Jesus said, let them, Scripture said, let all the wheat grow. At the end of the day, we will know the good wheat from the bad wheat, isn't it? So that is what we are doing. Any group on the ground that is fighting or supposedly fighting for Ambazonia, we cannot go about fighting them, but we are in the position to tell them, call them out on what they are doing wrong.
Let's talk about what they are doing that a lot of people are complaining, blockade of the entire Momo division. People cannot have medical care. They cannot carry their produce to the market. They cannot. How are such actions called lockdown in the interest of the people you people want to liberate, sir?
I don't know how accurate your statement is.
I just got a text from Bengbi today.
Where that is a problem, because that is not accurate. But as far as I know, the people of Mbengui, shops are open there. People are going to Babinda from Mbengui. I know that the stretch of the road between Labukam and Mbengui was blocked. We understand blocked by some Rook fighters belonging to the ADF. But those are some of the things I'm talking about that we condemn. I have personally gone on air condemning the blockage of that road, but not only that one. I did the same thing with a blockage of Indop Road. I did the same thing with a blockage of Babanki, Boyo Road. We don't endorse those things, but we don't want to be seen as fighting among ourselves, because the next narrative will be, oh, see those separatists, they are fighting among themselves. But we tell them, We don't hesitate to call it when we should call it. But I think that the people writing from Bangui, maybe they should also be telling you that their colonial officials shut down shops in Bangui since May 19 until last week. Those shops were reopened. I thought maybe somebody should be asking what we did to get those shops reopened. So it's interesting that these questions are coming from one Cameroonese other than people who really stand for a free and independent Ambazonia.
Apparently, you cannot do much about what you denounce the ADF and Ayabajo for doing. All you can do is issue press releases. How do you effectively control? You are the president of the interim government. How do you effectively, because when you talk about government, you're talking about effective control of territorial space. So how do you exercise the control, sir?
We cannot.
If all you do if all you do is issue press releases condemning certain actions.
No, I get your point. Let me say this. We have a certain level of control, but we cannot have 100% effective control, being that this is a war situation. When we have won the war and have a police force, a military force, security apparatus on the ground, then we can say we have effective total control. But while the war rages on, opportunists will take opportunity to do what they want to do. That happens in every war situation, not just our own.
Some time ago, we heard that in Bamenda, people of Hisakam that were clearing of trash. Would you allow them? Would you allow those people clean the town?
We will allow them to do that because those are supposed to be employees of the local council. So, and we want the city to be clean for the inhabitants.
So in other words, if the council operated, you don't have a problem with that?
Of course, we want the councils to operate, but they should understand they are operating in Ambazonia, not for La République du Cameroon.
The question, Mr. Chris Anu, that I have read on my phone repeated, my phone is flooded with questions, and you can understand why. Why are you so fractured? You are facing a government with a Ministry of Foreign Affairs. You are facing a government not only with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they have a defense force with a defined central command. How can you, so fractured, hope to fight that kind of government and win the battle?
Well, the thing is, I understand.
What is keeping you from being united? That's the question.
I will come to that, but let me also tell you, if you think that our fractions are stopping us from doing what we should be doing, I will say that is not true, because if that was indeed stopping us, Yaoundé would have dissolved the 2 cubes of sugar. But for 7 years, with a standing army, well-funded army, well-trained army, they still are not able to defeat us in Ambazonia. Comrade, divisions in the struggle like this one are not new. You live in the USA and you know that 35% of Americans did not support an independent America during the British-American War. Some 35% of them wanted to remain with England. You go to South Africa, you had the Chibutelezis and the rest who cooperated with the regime, the racist regime in South Africa. So listen, it is not strange what is happening here. My only wish is that everybody can realize that we don't have our country yet. We don't have a government yet on the ground, and see the need to come together. We work together. When we have caught the animal in the bush, then people can go out and strategize and form their political parties. If they want to rule, they want to govern, they stand elections. If they win, they govern. Right now, we are focused on catching the animal that is still in the bush. And I think this should be the motivation for everyone to want to come together to say that we snatch that animal.
But you're fighting.
I'm sorry, let me just make this point. I am one of those, and perhaps the only one in this independent movement who continues to advocate for a come together, a united front. I don't care to step down, ladies and divine. I don't care to step down if we are able to bring everybody together and we say, let's get a unique leader. But until others see that, they say you can take a horse to the river, you cannot force it to drink the water. So, but unless they see that, we'll keep on prosecuting this war the way we have done for the past 7 years. The good thing is that this interim government still commands the overwhelming support of Ground Zero, and we are still able to do this. It may take longer, but definitely we will do that.
You're fighting to catch the animal. It's supposed to be independence, I think. But why?
It's independence, and of course, the Southern Cameroons.
Correct. What is worrying many people is how can you, when I say you plural, fight to divide, share the booty when you have not even caught the animal? Why is the fight?
Well,
why is everybody's eye not on the ball?
That's a legitimate question, but I think you are asking the wrong person. Again, I just said that if there is any person in this independent movement who has tried to see that we fight under a united front, it is the person speaking to you now. You cannot force orders who do not want to do
now,
that.
Just hold your thought right there. Somebody's on the line. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, please turn down any volume that you have there and just speak to me like you have a phone conversation.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Norway.
Oh, from Norway. Nice to hear your voice, sir.
Yes.
What's your question for Chris?
Well, my question is not really a question, but I just want to beef up some question that he answered when you asked him. When you asked him at some point in the show why the interim government, or how did they come, was the idea of the interim government.
Correct.
So, yes, I just want to add to the fact that when we started the struggle, we named the struggle as a restoration struggle, that we wanted to restore we are about to restore our statehood. And we all know that before joining La Republique in 1961, Southern Cameroon had a government in Buea. If we claim that we are restoring our statehood, it is very logical that a government that was once existed from 1954 to 1972 needs to be restored, so as to give the complete package of restoration. So you see that with that now, the concept of interim government was conceived and created, give that complete resemblance of a restoration quest. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for calling from Norway. Chris, I told you a lot of people will be watching this show.
I can tell that.
So the question I was asking you, sir, you haven't caught the animal, but people are fighting. Some say they want the head, they want this, they want that. That's the problem, sir.
Again, it is a thing that is quite intriguing to both you and myself here. If there is anybody who has fought for a united front from day number one of this struggle, it is yours truly seated in front of you here. But again, as they say, you take a horse to the river, you don't force it to drink. The good thing is that we have a good formation here at the interim government without the willingness of others to cooperate. The interim government is still able to deliver Ambazonia from La Republique to Cameroon. Maybe it may just take a little longer time, but that will definitely happen.
What is your plan? And that's a question. It looks like I have somebody on the line from Ground Zero. Let me see if we can get him. My name is Divine Shamukong. My guest on the show is Mr. Chris Anu, who is the president of the Ambazonia interim government. Somebody on the line from Boya. Hello?
Yes, yes.
Yes, we're hearing you. What's your question?
Mr. Divine.
What's your question?
My question to Mr. Chris Anu is, as a politician and a political studies, and as a bona fide Cameroonian, and as a humanist, I want to ask Mr. Chris Anu, since he's posing as the new leader of the interim government, have the Anglophones that believe in his struggle, have they not died enough for a struggle that has actually died itself? That is my first question. Have they not died enough?
And just, yes, ask you. Go ahead with the second question, sir.
My second question is, if he thinks the Anglophones have not died enough, what else has this dividing propaganda, what else has this dividing propaganda that they keep propagating, which we all know in political and legal terms is secession, which we all know will bear no fruit as long as Cameroon, the two Cameroons, the former East Cameroon and former West Cameroon, that have come together to form the Republic Cameroon at constant.
All right. Thank you, sir. Good. You got his comment or question. Chris, how do you respond briefly? And we move on to the next question.
Yes, I will say that I am neither an Anglophone nor a Cameroonian. In fact, I would prefer to be in jail than to be called a Cameroonian. I am not a Cameroonian. And he says, how many people would have to die in a struggle that is dead itself? If the struggle was dead, then why are people still dying in a dead struggle? The problem is that there are people out there speaking the language of Cameroon who have a tough sense of Cameroonness, spirit of Cameroonness spirituality in them, and they will never see the reason why some of us are sacrificing our life, our time to fight for the freedom of their own children. Let me also add that, but I'm not surprised, because in a war situation, you don't expect everybody to support it. But the good thing is that the overwhelming majority of Ambazonians, Southern Cameroonians, not Cameroonese, the overwhelming of Southern Cameroonians, Ambazonians, they believe in the cause. And
let me ask you this, sir. We've heard
it is not dead, it is still on and alive.
We hear words like the majority or most and all those things. How do you come to that conclusion that the majority support?
You don't wage war until you have money. And where is the money coming from? The money is coming from the people, that majority. That is what we are referring to. Of course, the moral aspect of it comes in there. Ground Zero is still fighting and saying, I wish you were in the middle of this to read some of the messages that we receive, some of the audios that we receive, the emails we receive telling us, keep it on.
I have forgot. Just hold your thought right there, Chris. Hello, this is Chat Night Africa. You are watching Voices of Africa. Hello. Please turn down the volume that you have there. You have there. Turn down the volume and just speak to me as if you're talking on the. Having a full conversation. Please, can you turn down the volume? And I have a caller on the line. Yes, what's your question, sir? Hello? Okay, looks like you have to call back. You have to call back. Sorry. Anyway, so let's move on. Before I get the next caller, war is going on. There's got to be a game plan. What is the game plan? Winning independence on the battlefield, on the diplomatic front, or in some court of law? There has to be a game plan.
All we want is independence, a free and independent Southern Cameroon.
Please hold your thought. Hold your thought. Hello.
Hello, Mr. Divine.
Yes, please. Welcome to Voices of Africa with Mr. Chris Anu was my guest. What's your question?
Yeah. Before my question, thank you for giving me the opportunity to say a word or two here. I first of all would like to call on the indulgence of the comrades or supposedly comrades calling in from Ground Zero and talking about statistics of schools that are going on and, the number of people that are killing and how the two Cameroons can never be separated. To also think of bringing us the statistics of the killings, the rapings, the lootings, the burning of our people in Big Babanki and Boyo currently going on, and to tell us what they think that Paul Biya is doing that helps the people of Ambazonia by killing this great a number of Ambazonians. We have over 40,000 people that have been slaughtered. Do they really believe that by killing so many Cameroonians, as they call it, Paul Biya is helping the country in any way? Is it economically? Is it in the social, area of the well-being of the people? Is it in infrastructural development? We see Cameroonians dying on the streets like rats every day. They are in Yaoundé, they don't even have water to drink. Talk less of roads. Talk less of electricity in a country that is so blessed. Everything in Cameroon is going into the pockets of thieves and their masters, in France and other places. And people will come here and they want to play they call that woman Francois Fonin song to Paul Biya here. It's a shame that people like this come up and they are of Ambazonian origin talking like this when Ambazonians are being killed.
Thank you, sir. Yes, it's more of a comment, Chris, than a question. The question that I had before the call, I saw the call coming in, is what is your game plan? Do you hope to win this independence by war, diplomacy, or in some court of law?
Well, in this case, all that we want is a free and independent Southern Cameroons, Ambazonia. It is the end determining the means, because if whatever option, whether diplomacy or battlefront, will give us victory, so let it be, as far as it gives us a free and independent country of our own.
You are watching Voices of Africa on Chat Night Africa. And my guest is Mr. Chris Anu. Chris, for 7 years now, this war has been going on. Ambazonia hasn't had any single international support. Could it be that the international community finds your argument for the war weak?
I do not think so. The war is not over. We are still sourcing the international community for that support. And I think so far, actually, is not an accurate statement to say we've not found support, because we saw the sanctions that the USA levied against Cameroon a few years ago when Donald Trump was still there. We have also seen the Swiss come in to try to mediate. Now we see the Canadians coming in to try to mediate. I will call that support. I will call that support because I think They do not want to see the continuous massacring of Ambazonians on the ground, and they look for solutions. If you are talking about financial support, maybe correct, military support, may be correct, but listen, on our own, we are still holding on to our own.
I have a question.
The territory is still with us. The 2 cubes of sugar remain undeserved.
I have a question. I have a question from China. A quick question for Chris. If you claim to be the president of the interim government, can you precisely say which faction you represent, or are you representing the entire movement?
I'm entering the entire interim government. As we have said, there is only one legitimate interim government in Ambazonia, the interim government that has the backing or that came with the Restoration Council of the People.
A question from London. Which country sympathizes with Ambazonia? As president, how will you bring the UN to your side when you, at one point, call for attacks on all UN staff on the ground in the northwest and southwest regions?
I think that is an overstatement. I never at any point called for an attack on all UN staff on the ground. I did warn the UNDP staff on the ground. I repeat that, and we have the footages on screen. I will do it again today if the UNDP is seen to be trying to do the same thing they were trying to do then. I will say exactly the same thing. But as per which country would support us, it is not, we don't come and sit on television to discuss strategy. But let me again emphasize, I will say exactly what I said then to the UNDP. If any other United Nations institution goes on the ground and is trying to do what they were trying to do then, don't forget.
I have somebody on the line. Please hold your thought.
All right.
Hello.
Hello?
Yes, please keep your questions or questions short.
Okay, this is Ben Aki. Thank you for this show today, and thank you for bringing Chris Anu to this panel. But it would have been greater if he were contrasting his views with a federalist, because what he is doing so far is being evasive. He's not answering the question, he's just spinning it with the narratives that they've had so far. So the question to Mr. Chris Anu, I say hello to you, sir. You know that to govern people, you can only do so with their consent. So what is really the problem with the governing council is that it cannot demonstrate how the people get you the power and what exactly the people sign up for. Because at the beginning, you acknowledged that when the people rose up in 2016, they were asking for a return to the contract of reunification, which was a federal system of government. That remains the fight that can be won. That remains the fight that has a historical, constitutional, and diplomatic basis. But you have drifted away into a war of independence. So let me share with you these facts from opinion polls on the ground. And I think that's what we ought to be doing. And that's what we need to do to contrast our views. Because former Southern Cameroons was a society that was permissive to all kinds of views. Ntumaza had his party all along and was for one Cameroon. He had the permission to run his politics with the UPC in Cameroon. So we need to go back to that point. But to keep my question short, when you ask the majority of people of former Southern Cameroons, do you support their independence? There is no question. About 80% will support it. But when you ask them, do you support independence by war? Only about 25 to 30% support it. So they do not sanction the war that you people are carrying out. And it is clear that for 7 years, no diplomatic support means we don't have any chance of getting that independence through diplomacy. Now, when you ask them, do you support federalism as a just way of arranging our way of life? They say yes. But my question to you is, why are you preventing people of former Southern Cameroons from freely expressing their federalist views? Why are you targeting federalists? Why are you telling people not to go out and vote? Right? So you can only govern people with the consent of the people. Are you willing to increasingly engage with federalists in debates to contrast your views rather than just spin the narratives that you've been sharing?
And are you ready to allow federalists to fight the way that the best fight? And that's political, not with guns. That requires us going out freely and talking and convincing people. Are you willing to make that commitment now that today we can go back to the former Southern Cameroon where arguments and freedom of conscience guide the way that people conduct public affairs?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, before you answer the question, in the area that you say you control, is there anything called freedom of speech, or it's freedom of speech, but what happens to you after the freedom doesn't matter?
No, how can you stop? If you are fighting for people, how will you even question whether freedom of speech exists? Of course, that is one of the characteristics of a democratic system. Freedom of speech comes first. But let me go to Comrade Aki, Ben Aki out there. Comrade, I think the unfortunate thing is that our comrades within the federalist movement fail to see that we have cried for federalism for year in, year out. AAC 1, AAC 2, Cardinal Toomey, Dr. Monzo, they even put on all these organizations to talk about a return to federation. Frundi, whether 10 state or 4 state or 2 state, this federal movement has not worked. It was when we demanded a return to the 1961 federal structure that they declared war on us. But it is unfortunate that comrades like Ben Aki continue to look at stuff that hasn't worked for 61 years. So we are now saying, if Yaoundé, since Yaoundé failed to restore the original system that constitutionally was never ever supposed to change in the first place, then we are left with no option to going back, but to go back to the pre-1961 picture of Ambazonia. That is where we are.
Chris, when this thing started in 2016, 2017, nobody, and I think even Sisiku wasn't talking about an armed struggle. How did we get here? Teachers and lawyers were protesting for legitimate reasons. So how did it get from there? Because a lot of people are saying you hijacked the revolution.
Where the people pick up arms, Divine, the people picked up arms. The first place where arms were picked up was in Umojak. And Sissoko was in the diaspora. We were all in the diaspora. But the people themselves picked up arms. And once a Umojak did it, the BLM did it, Momo did it, Bui did it. It just grew from there, and you could not resist it. The people are still hungry for their freedom and liberty. We support it. We will fund it as much as we can.
And if you have any questions, dial the number 240-603-7367, 240-603-7367. If you are a long way away, do 001 before you dial the number.
We love Chat Night Africa.
Now you love Chat Night Africa. Let's keep going. Chris, at some point, we began hearing loud drum beats for referendum. Is it a tacit admission of defeat? Why didn't you talk about referendum from the start? Why now?
Well, and it's good you asked that question. I wanted to get into it in Comrade Ben Aki's question, because he says the independent movement is skewing the voice of the federalists in this struggle. No, if we were trying to skew the opinion and voices of the federalists in this struggle, we wouldn't be talking about a referendum at this moment. I hope that all the federalists out there, we now say, okay, this is an opportunity for all Ambazonians' voice to be heard. The federalist voice can be heard through a referendum. Independentist voice can be heard in a referendum. And I think here is where we want our colleagues in the federal movement, let's join our voices and call for this referendum, because it takes ultimate decision-making into the hands of the people who are encountering the suffering and the killings on ground zero. And you ask why we didn't talk about referendum from the beginning. We didn't because we were hoping that the regime in Yaoundé would see reason to call for an all-inclusive dialogue that sits everybody on the table and will resolve it. But they walked away from Switzerland. You know that. They have also walked away from Canada. So having walked away from two potential peace processes, what do? You shift it to the people and say, if Cameroon has any doubt, because they are in the habit of saying this war is only being propagated by diasporans. If they have any doubt that Ambazonians on the ground want a free and independent country of their own, let them also support a referendum. And it will be the swiftest means to bring this conflict to an end.
I have a question sent to me from Yaoundé. Mr. Chris Anu, when are you leaders, those of you in the diaspora, you, Ayabachu, and the others, Capo Daniel, when are you coming home to carry your AK-47 and also fight like others?
Well, somebody has to be in the diaspora to provide the finances for those who are carrying the AK-47 on the ground. I think it is ignorance to want to suggest that everybody come and carry AK-47. Not everybody will carry AK-47. If I had the opportunity to be on the ground, I will carry it. My brother was there, he carried it, and he led the struggle for years until he was killed. You can trust if I was there, I would do it. But somebody has to be in the diaspora to look for finances to help those, support those who are carrying the AKs.
In the days of the SCNC, we had the force of argument instead of the argument of force. Would you say the people who believed more in the force of argument were cowards?
Not at all. Not at all. They were not cowards. The problem is Cameroon refused to listen to the force of argument. Cameroon chose the force of war. People like Njoli Tume, who died a few years ago, they were completely in support of this war because they who propagated the idea of the force of argument died without seeing one. They met in Boya in 1993, met in Bamenda in 1994, AAC 1 and 2, talked about the force of argument. It never happened. They were scorned by the regime in Yaoundé. And so finally, when the younger ones pick arms, the Njolu endorsed it. They realized the time for the message of the force of argument was over.
On Chat Night Africa, Chris will be brought back up on the platform momentarily. Lots of people have said on the Ambazonian side that Mr. Biya declared war. But before I bring you a short clip of what actually is causing a lot of controversy, people who support Biya say that Ambazonia leaders declared war and Biya only responded. Before I bring that clip of Mr. Biya talking about war, I'd like to inform everybody that this broadcast is on YouTube. You can actually also follow it on www.chatnightafrica.net. Ladies and gentlemen, here is where all this is said to have started and with different interpretations.
J'ai appris avec émotion l'assassinat de 4 militaires camerounais et de 2 policiers dans le sud-ouest de notre pays. Suite à la disparition de ces 6 valeureux militaires et policiers, je voudrais présenter mes condoléances aux familles éprouvées, ainsi qu'à nos vaillantes forces de défense et de sécurité. Et je pense que les choses sont désormais parfaitement claires pour tout le monde. Le Cameroun est victime des attaques à répétition d'une bande de terroristes se réclamant d'un mouvement sécessionniste. Face à ces actes d'agression, je tiens à rassurer le peuple camerounais que toutes les dispositions sont prises pour mettre hors d'état de nuire ces criminels et faire en sorte que la paix et la sécurité soient sauvegardées sur toute l'étendue du territoire national. Je vous remercie.
This is Chat Night Africa, and you are watching Voices of Africa. That interview was being accorded to Mr. Charles Ndungu, now General Manager of CLTV. Ladies and gentlemen, once more, Chris Anu on the platform. Chris, you have heard Mr. Biya there clearly reacting to the killing of 6 people in uniform. That you people, by doing that, is an act of war. Why is Mr. Biya wrong?
He is wrong. Mr. Biya is wrong because they have been massacred in Garebo, and he has said nothing. If you consider them his citizens, are they lesser citizens? School children have been killed, massacred in Kumba. Paul Biya said nothing. Were they lesser citizens than Francophones? We have seen in Big Babanki the massacre of people in their own homes and burned down. Homes, thousands of homes in settlement towns, over 400 burned down in Ambazonia. Paul Biya, the same criminal you had on the screen there, has not made a single statement. Are these people less citizens than those 6 so-called French Cameroon soldiers? Listen, before Biya made that statement, Mancho, BBC, and quite a number of them, they had been picked up and put behind bars. Guess where they are today? They are still behind bars. We have no regrets. We never have any regrets for waging this war and prosecuting it the way we are doing it.
A question just came to my text. Mr. Chris Anu, are you fighting Francophone Cameroonians, or you are fighting the Francophone-led government?
We are fighting the state of La République du Cameroon, whoever the citizens are.
Would you have a problem with Francophone Cameroonians who are settled in any of the, on the other side of the Mongo?
Our war is against La République du Cameroon.
All right. Another question that has just been, I'm having lots of questions coming left and right, and you can understand that. Chris, you have done well, that's the text saying, you have done well to acknowledge that there have been excesses by Amba soldiers. When are they going to be held accountable? Number 2, the B part of the question. So when are they going to be held accountable? B part of the question is, are you taking time to teach your fighters what war crimes are?
We actually done so. We actually have a code of conduct that every fighting camp on the ground was given a copy. Again, for those who understand what we are talking about, this is a war situation, and when you are based in the diaspora and trying to conduct business on the ground without a security mechanism to control some of these things, you are very limited to what you are able to do. Then we try our best. We get the boys, talk to them, explain to them what they should do. I'll give you a practical example. When Fiamasha, my brother, just picked up arms and went to the BLM to fight, one of the things that we said to him was, I personally said to him was, listen, this war is not against our people. We are fighting to liberate our people, to protect our people, to take back our territory. This is what you should never do. Never you attack the civilians, because if you attack the civilians, they will betray you They can come around and smile with you and call you titles, but you never know who they go back into their homes, pick the phone, and call. So make sure that the civilians are your real friends. If they are your real friends, they will protect you. And Fimasha was protected by the BLM people until only a few of those fighters who were with him in the bush formerly were able to go and kill him. So this is the message we give to every general on the ground. If you make the community your friends, they will not betray you. But you make them enemies by extorting from them, by abducting them, by levying taxes on them. You make them your enemies, and they will sell you. And we are seeing it. We continue to say to every commander on the ground, the community, the people in the community in which you live, you must make sure they are true friends, not your enemies. And you can only achieve that by making sure they live in peace.
Perhaps we will end with this question. I have lots of questions, but this show is designed to be 90 minutes. Chris Anu, somebody writes, attended a Skakuv conclave in Nigeria in 2017 as a newsman covering the conclave for his blog. The Cameroon Journal, before that, no one had heard of him in the Anglophone struggle. He emerged from the conclave as Secretary for Communications in the interim government. How did this happen? How did a complete outsider become a member of the separatist interim government? That's the question I have for you.
I think there is some degree of ignorance there. Let me explain this for those who don't know me. 1992, after the presidential elections of that year, I wrote a book titled Criminal at the Presidency. And after writing that book, the regime issued a warrant of arrest for me, and I moved to moved to Nigeria. If you want to know about that, you can ask me. Albert Mokong is dead, but Barrister Harmony Bob Guy is still out there. He was privy to that. In fact, the document with which I traveled to seek refugee status was issued from his legal office in Bamenda. But before even before then, I was at AAC1, AAC2. Some of you probably read the little book titled The Man, Ni John Frundi. The Man, Ni John Frundi. I wrote that book. My activism did not start in 2016. I went on exile because of my political activism, both for a democratic Cameroon and a free and independent Amazonia. Probably somebody asking that question probably just came to the scene, but I have been on the scene since the launching of the ADF and up to today. Even when I created the Cameroon Journal, it was all to liberate, then it was for a democratic Cameroon. But when Cameroon declared war, I thought it was an opportunity to come in to put in my own quota in support of a free and independent Amazonia. And good enough, the leaders then saw what I was worth. And yes, I attended the conclave in Nigeria as an observer. I was invited as an observer. But it was from there the interim government was formed, and Sisiko felt that I should be his communication secretary and then brought me into that. That was how I got here.
Okay, point taken. Before a text reads, before Ni John Frundi died, he challenged you to return to Cameroon and assist IDPs. You told John Frundi that it was unsafe for you to travel to Cameroon. Why do you think, the text says, it is okay for you to create unsafe living conditions for the populations of the North and Southwest regions while you and your family stay in the safety and comfort of the United States? The text says this comes across as selfish and hypocritical. Your response?
I think the person who is posing that question is not being accurate. Of all the leaders in the diaspora whose mother has been to the gulags in French Cameroon said, my own mother, 80 years old, whose sister has faced a military tribunal in that country. My own sister, whose brother has been at the forefront leading this war on ground zero and killed in the battlefield. My own brother. I still have family there. So the idea that you are in the diaspora and you want some people to fight and die, if I was being selfish and wanting some people to fight and die on ground zero, I will leave my mother to go to jail there, leave my sister to go to jail there, leave my brother to be killed there. Of course not. But again, it goes back to the point that, listen, some people must be in the diaspora to provide the means by which the people carrying the guns prosecute the war. It's a necessity. Everybody cannot be on the ground.
Your point taken. But Chris, you would at least give credit to the Francophone-led administration and Francophones in general that thousands and thousands of Anglophone Cameroonians are living in French-dominated cities and nobody is troubling them.
What is the difference? We have Ambazonians living in Nigeria. We have some living in Ghana. We have some. What I expect to see from the Francophones, if you can give them any credit, is to say they too are demonstrating the treatment of Ambazonians since this war began. Have you seen a single Francophone demonstration on the streets of Bafoussam, of Douala, of Yaoundé to protest this war, the killings? No. Our refugees in Yaoundé, Douala, and the West region, they are just there as we have refugees in Nigeria. So what we expected the Francophones to do is go to the streets and demonstrate and demand that Cameroon calls off the war. Cameroon gets on the negotiation table and end the massacre in Ambazonia. We have not seen a single one of them. Not even their leaders, the Cantos and so on, the Karawalas and so on. We have not seen a single Francophone leader calling for a demonstration against the massacre in Ambazonia. So they are not different. That's why we say this war is against La République du Cameroun, everything that makes up that part of the country.
I interviewed a political scholar from Eritrea, and he was so disillusioned that Mr. Isaias Afwerki talked like you are talking during the revolution, and then when independence came, he became a tyrant. Chris, what is there to guarantee that if you people had independence for the former British Southern Cameroons, you folks will not be another breed of tyrants like Afwerki is in Eritrea?
Well, I think that's a very good, legitimate question there, and which is why I keep saying we have an animal in the bush. Movements that think that they can go capture ground zero and rule as warlords, they make a very big mistake, because that is not going to happen. With the examples of South Sudan, with the examples of Eritrea and so on, nobody in the international community is going to say, Chris, go and take over Amazonia and become the first president. Or Ayaba, go and take over and become the first president. If we see the need to come together, work as a team, I believe what will happen is, at the end of the day, international mediators or the international community will say, maybe there should be a transitional government of 3 years, 4 years, and where all the groups come to the table, form that government, choose a leader who leads at that moment, within which a constitution is created, voting modalities are created, and then political parties forms. If political parties are formed under this situation, then you don't have a situation where a warlord emerges and wants to become a dictator, like in the case of Eritrea. I think this is the picture that I see. If we do that, we will not have another dictator as in Eritrea. And it is unfortunate that the people of Eritrea fought for 30 years only to end up in the hands of a dictator.
That sounds like moving from frying pan to fire.
Yeah, let me tell you why I am very much different. I've been given 3 years for this interim government. I want to set the example. When those 3 years are over, I will tell the Restoration Council, my time is up, call for elections, vote for a new leader. Because if we are fighting for a democratic society and we're not setting examples as we fight on, what are we then fighting for? If you have leaders who are put in position, they're not willing to leave. What we see in some of the leaders is exactly a precursor as you see in Eritrea. If they are not able to leave a small organization like this one that is trying to prosecute the war, what is the evidence?
Chris, here's my last question for you before we go. If the international community called you to mediate with Mr. Biya, what are you willing to give up? Because in a negotiation, you have to be willing to give up something.
I will not sit here and pontificate on what we compromise. I will wait for that opportunity to come and we'll talk about that. Right now, it is not here.
I hope that you're not worried about your cabinet impeaching you. Anyway, thank you so much, Chris, for taking my questions on Chat Night Africa today. I truly appreciate it. I invited Ayabacho. He agreed, and last minute, he declined to come. I told him that my questions were going to be probing. I don't know. I'm still hoping that he will come at some point. Thank you again so much. It is good that you are denouncing what are called or what appear to be war crimes committed by many people who say the Ambazonia soldiers. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. You have a last word for just 30 seconds.
I have also challenged people like you to bring in Cameroonese. And
believe me, I will. I'm trying to bring in.
Do some of these probing questions. Bring on Paul Atanganji.
Absolutely.
Bring on Ngole. Bring on Dion Wote. Bring on Professor Ngo, who was calling here. And, Professor Ngo, I forgot.
Would you like to debate Professor Ngo?
Absolutely.
We are going to arrange that debate. Thank you so much for putting him on the spot. I hope Professor Ngo is listening and he will not turn down the invitation. Thank you, Chris, for coming. That's how we wrap up this edition of Voices of Africa on Chat Night. My name is Divine and Chamukong. I hope you enjoyed the show. I want to thank all of those who dialed in with their questions. I've got to go. There are many questions coming, but I could stay with Chris till tomorrow morning. He is still going to come back. Chris doesn't run away from a fight, media fight. No, he did not run away. He has promised to come back and even face his opponents in the Federalist movement. I will be organizing that debate. Again, thank you. Merci à tout le monde. My time is up. Let me say thank you to my producer, who is in Lagos, who stayed up to make sure that this show be aired on all the social media platforms that we run on. Twitter, www.chatnightafrica.net, the YouTube. You can watch all of it there on our broadcast website.